Call tonight's meeting, the regular meeting of the Village Tinley Park Planning Commission for October 18, 2018. We'll call the meeting to order and begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have a roll call. Roll call.
Stanton. Here. Engel. Manny.
Here.
Gatto.
Here.
Gray.
Here.
Augustiniak. Aitchison. Vic.
Here.
Chairman Shaw.
Present. Okay, we have a forum this evening. Any communications from staff?
No.
None? Entertain a motion for approval of the minutes of the October 4th, 2018 regular meeting. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Move Commissioner Stanton. Second?
Second.
Second Commissioner Manning. Are there any comments, corrections, edits, or additions on the minutes? Hearing none. All in favor of approving the minutes from the October 4th, 2018 regular meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries. Minutes are approved. Okay, we only have one item on the agenda tonight, and we'll get right to it. It's a workshop for Bremen Station, 6775 South Street, Bain Properties LLC, for site plan approval, special use variations, and preliminary final plat approval. I am going to assume that many, if not most of you folks over here are representing the petitioner, or if not, you are the petitioner, so welcome. And chance to speak to the staff that there's been a lot of work going back and forth in this area. So without any further ado, we'll move straight to the staff report.
So, yeah, this is a workshop. The name of the project is been settled in at Bremen Station now. It's at 6775 South Street, so just west of the Boulevard project that just came before you about a month ago. Again, this is site plan approval, special use. There's a few variations, and then final plat approval for the subdivision. The development's a 5-story mixed-use development. It'll have 39 residential apartments. It's 60,311 square feet, I think, total, and then of that, there's 4,579 square feet, which is a single commercial space on the first floor, anticipated to be a restaurant. There's outdoor dining there too, but get into that in a little bit. It's just kind of a general overview of the project as it stands now. So the existing site, again, the southwest corner of 67th Court and South Street, just west of that Boulevard project, east of Citibank, which is along Oak Park Avenue, north of the Vote Visual Arts Building, which is run by the Tinley Park District, and then just south of the Metra commuter lot. Currently, they're realigning the road and stuff out there now, so it might have been difficult to kind of drive past. They're moving some of the utilities and kind of doing some road work out there that's been needed, and then also is kind of anticipation of this development or development on this site as well. So it's currently a vacant site. It's around 15,000 square feet. And then there will be a vacated public right-of-way portion, which is around 2,157 square feet. So combined is just over 17,000 square feet for the project. So a little bit smaller than the Boulevard, but still packing a lot into that 17,000 square feet. The site previously was the Bremen Cash Store, which was built in 1887. I won't get too far into this because I know it's a sore subject of the 2007 though, there was an approval for a Boston Blackies that would repurpose that building. It got demolished in 2008, kind of without the village's approval. And there's been some lingering effects and stuff from that, but has been a vacant site since 2008. They were going to build a replica, but then with the downturn in the economy, backed out of the property altogether. The current owner and developer of this property has owned it since 2012, and then kind of the first round of plans were submitted for kind of an initial discussion review in November 2017 for the project that's here today. Kind of the first, so coming out of that original Bremen Cash Store was the village has kind of kept some original turned oak columns that were actually used structurally in that building, just with the hope that something could be repurposed from that building. So I know the developers kind of talked that they would, that we thought at first maybe these could be used on the exterior. They can't be used structurally really. And then kind of by the look of the building they're trying to go for, they didn't really tie into the exterior. So their hope is that these could be used by the tenant on an interior of the space. Our kind of opinion too is that maybe they could be used on the interior of the kind of apartment entrance there to kind of frame that out. Since that'll be, you know, the majority of people coming kind of in and out of the apartments are going to be using that entrance, that this would be a cool way to kind of tie that original Bremen Cash Store to the new development here. So here's just kind of the original approval and depiction that kind of came into the village, just to give you an idea of, sorry, changing one thing but not the other. So those were the oak columns. And then kind of our first open item discussing that. Here's the original depiction kind of where we started from and what they were aiming for. Doesn't show brick kind of in this, but similar to what we have now. The zoning of the property is downtown core. Again, surrounded by downtown core to the west of this, as well as to the east of it. West is Citibank, and then to the east is that Boulevard development. To the north is Civic zoning, which is the train station and the commuter lots. And then to the south is Civic zoning, which is the Vogue Fine Arts building, utilized by the Tinley Park District. There's some general kind of zoning requirements from our legacy plan that are up there. Just lot width, minimum building height. This lot was kind of anticipated through the legacy plan, if you kind of look at it, as being redeveloped with that Citibank property as one development, and with no anticipation of the right-of-way kind of being vacated. So it's most of the zoning, kind of the lot lines, all the depictions from the legacy plan and the legacy code kind of tie this in with that stretch of the Citibank building and then the parking lot to the west of this. So starting with the site plan, again, a little over 60,000 square foot building, 4,579 square foot first floor residential, 39 residential apartment units. 20 of those are one bedroom, 19 are two bedrooms. All the one bedrooms are 800 square feet. The two bedrooms range from 945 square feet to 1,270 square feet. The one bedrooms all meet the 800 square foot minimum. Two bedroom units have a 1,000 square foot minimum in our zoning code, so there is only one unit is below that 1,000, and that's the 945 square feet. The alternative to that is turning that into a one bedroom unit. We kind of thought that they thought a 945 square feet was something someone would want, and we kind of liked having more two bedroom units in this one. So instead of kind of rearranging what they had already done. So that there is a variation there for that one unit to be under 1,000 square feet for the 2-bedroom. Then there's basement and first floor parking. It's a parking garage for the residents only, so there wouldn't be any commercial parking in there. So a full basement parking, and then half of the first floor, basically everything that's not an apartment entrance or the commercial is parking. So about half of the first floor to the south of the building. There's a second floor rooftop terrace that'll be shared by the residents. And then on the 5th floor, there's an exercise room, lounge, and terrace as additional amenities for the apartments. The building's 5 stories in height as well. Just a quick building layout. Again, the basement is parking, so there's 28 parking spaces in that basement, 22 standard, 6 compact, bike storage, restaurant storage, building storage, mechanical equipment's all in the basement. The first floor is the commercial and restaurant square footage. Then there's 13 parking spaces on that first floor, which 11 standard and 2 accessible spaces. There's also the apartment entrance along South Street, and then there's a 7-foot wide kind of outdoor dining space that's between the building and South Street. That's all on private property and not on the public right-of-way. Second floor has that rooftop terrace and 11 apartments on it, and then the 3rd and 4th floors are just the 11 apartments on each floor, and then the 5th floor are those amenities, and then 6 apartments on that penthouse 5th floor. So here's kind of an overall depiction of just kind of the site. Again, the majority of it is a building that maximized that kind of buildable area of the lot, which is what the legacy plan and the legacy code is anticipating, and as well as how most kind of downtown development happens, is how much of that lot can you really utilize and not put surface parking and things like that in there. So just kind of an overview of some open items we have here. There's a variation that would permit that due to that kind of outdoor dining space that's out there. Typically, we only allow a dining alcove to be 50% of a frontage. And along South Street, there's only a 5-foot maximum setback there. So instead of them just doing 50%, because it's kind of a short width there, they've kind of just made it the whole thing. So that way they have a little bit more useful dining space. They could kind of bump out certain areas, but at a certain point that just looks awkward and such a short span there. And kind of that unique kind of triangle layout in the front makes it a little bit difficult. So there is a variation for that, kind of allows for that outdoor dining. The next open item is the variation for the frontage buffer width. So along 67th Street, you can see there the buffer along South Street exists, and then along most of 67th Street, there's kind of that landscape buffer between the sidewalk and the street. There is a small portion there that will not have a landscape buffer in it, and it'll just be sidewalk. So that's a variation for approximately 60 feet in length there to have no buffer area. To put that in would pretty severely cut down on kind of the restaurant space or take away from parking, just kind of the unique layout of that corner. So, and in a very tight right of way over there as it exists now currently. So they'd exceed actually the walkway width for that for a little bit, but there wouldn't be any trees or landscaping buffer. And the kind of third picture here with the streetscape and site plan is a variation for on-street parking spaces along South Street. So much like with the Boulevard development, typically there's a corridor requirement through there that as you're doing the public right-of-way improvements, you'd have kind of on-street parking right there. Their thought and our thought kind of supporting that too is that this is a pretty short lot width here that would only be able to fit in a few cars. It's also really close. It's two intersections that are pretty close together. So 67 Fort and South Street, and then Oak Park Avenue and South Street. So it's a pretty short distance there. To have cars kind of pulling in and out could mess with that. So if there was going to be parking there, we need a little bit more of a traffic analysis. And again, there's only such a short distance there if you actually put curbs and bump outs to get on-street parking at that location. So that would also kind of eat into, again, the building and the restaurant setback there in the front that they're trying to utilize. So doing that with any space designated for parking would kind of eat into that, or the outdoor dining that we really kind of want to see along South Street. So the last kind of open item that we had with the streetscape site plan, and the last thing we were looking into was the streetscape plans in general for this. They designed some here that kind of go with the intent of what the legacy plan wants, but we are working on a master streetscape plan with a consultant that'll kind of tie in all these developments and hopefully everything downtown going into the future. So just kind of, these are there for kind of a depiction, but then also recommending that as a condition kind of these approvals that whatever's decided for that final streetscape plan will be utilized before construction is permitted. So moving to kind of the south side of this that backs up to the Vogt Visual Arts building, there's existing parking spaces that actually go on to this Bremen Station subject property. So you can kind of see on this depiction, there's part of the part that is outlined in red is actually on the subject parcel in the petitioner's property. Who knows when this was done? It goes back quite a few years. So they have been working with the Park District on this, and they've come up with kind of an initial plan to do some parallel spaces. So I believe there's 7 spaces there now, and they'll be replacing it with 6 parallel spaces that would be on the Park District side. Currently, that site has parallel spaces kind of running for most of it, so this would kind of continue that trend. It wouldn't be out of place out there.
Can you go back to that?
Sure. So they're looking to stripe those in along the side there. And I put the little note on there, but just these property lines don't necessarily line up perfect with the aerial below it. If you're looking at the image on a PowerPoint. So they are planning on striping those. They've talked with the Park District. We're kind of waiting on kind of a formal acknowledgement from them, since this will affect their operations there, and just the petitioners kind of agreed that they would rectify that over there and make it work, but we're just looking for the Park District to say, yeah, that's kind of what we want to see there. So in addition,
So just, so I have clarity, I realize the property lines that you see on the GIS and the aerial are, is there encroachment? I can't tell from the plat. Does the pavement encroach onto this property?
yes. Yeah, it's kind of hard to tell in that little red area. You can see where the if you look at that, or in the plans, you can see the pavement goes a little less than 10 feet kind of into their property.
And so if I understand the open point, the Park District has to vacate that,
Yeah.
or come to agreement, or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, so it is on the petitioner's property. There's not really an easement there or anything that we've been told exists. We just want the petitioners to work with the Park District to make sure that this doesn't disrupt their operations, that they come to some kind of agreement here and situation where they don't just tear this up and then them to fend for themselves. So it is on their property, but we just want to see them work with the Park District to get some kind of agreement, because it does encroach onto the petitioner's property. So. Sure. Yeah. I don't know if it'll help, but yeah, no problem. So I guess the other open item in regards to this is those parallel spaces that they're proposing there kind of back up to a sidewalk that's on the south street of, or the south side of this development. So there's a 5-foot sidewalk, and then that would be parallel parking spaces. There's a fence that's out there now, but they're planning on taking that down and not putting it back up. So we just want to see that at final engineering and at permitting, that there would be some kind of grade difference between those parking spaces and the sidewalk, so that way it kind of works as a bumper stop or a bumper overhang, that you're not going to have cars parked on a sidewalk, and you're not going to have any type of conflicts there between pedestrians or the vehicles parking on the Vogt building. For the next one is the canopy overhang, kind of along 67th Court. We allow a 5-foot encroachment into the right-of-way for any canopies. This is kind of a metal flat canopy that they're carrying around the building. So we allow a 5-foot encroachment. They proposed 7 foot and 2 inches there, so we've been requesting to revise that and bring it down to 5 feet. They don't have to bring down the other one that kind of goes over the outdoor dining space along South Street. That's over private property. But on the 67th Court side, that's public right away and only allowed to encroach 5 feet. So revising that. Just getting into some of the floor plans. I'll kind of run through them all here, but if you guys want to go back and maybe dig into them a little bit more afterwards, we can do that. So again, these are all high-end luxury apartment units. They have in-unit washer and dryers. The units all have balconies. Some of those balconies are recessed. Some have projecting balconies, depending on where they're at. 2 second-floor units are going to have kind of a privately fenced patio area that'll be next to that shared roof terrace on the first floor. So originally the plan was just to kind of have those 2 units actually utilize that whole rooftop area as their balconies. So they brought in that kind of shared roof terrace aspect of it. Thought that was a kind of a cool thing, especially with everything happening downtown, for people maybe wanting to go sit out there and watch people at the band and the shows that are down there at the metro station, or watching the farmer's market, or whatever they want to do. So, but that still does keep 2 private kind of terrace balconies that are down there, and separated with a I believe 3-foot brick wall that'll kind of blend in with the rest of the exterior of this building. So I guess the rear balconies, those encroach. So the building's set back 5 feet from that rear south property line that abuts the Vogt Visual Arts Center. So those balconies go that 5 feet to the property line. Typically, balconies aren't allowed to encroach. They're allowed to encroach to the property line on all other sides, but not on the rear property line. Usually that's because you could have some kind of rear access or alley that's back there. In this case, they're kind of utilizing the entire site. There's also a limited or unlikely side that the Vogt Visual Arts building is going to redevelop at any point. It's a historic building that the Park District owns, and I think they're pretty well set on keeping that historic and using it the way it's being used now. So it's unlikely anything to the south is going to be redeveloped. So they are requesting a variation for those balconies to encroach that 5 feet, so that way they can have projecting balconies and not recessed balconies in the rear. Give it a little more appeal on the rear side. Floors 2 through 5 do have a setback, so that first floor kind of comes out and fills that vacated right-of-way portion. However, then it kind of steps back for the second through the 5th floors, up to 44 feet that's there. So typically there's only a 5-foot maximum, like I said, with that 7 feet before. It kind of is to create a street wall, create a pedestrian area. This is a fairly unique lot design, though. It's not a square lot. It kind of comes out to that triangle. We wanted to see that space utilized, but especially with apartments, I think the developer, and they can maybe speak a little more on this, is it's difficult to create rentable, usable space that when you're not dealing with a rectangle. So they're utilizing the roof area as much as they can, kind of for the residents, but there is a 44-foot setback there for their second floor on up to the roof. So that's a variation there. Going back to kind of that first floor, there's an apartment entrance and vestibule lobby and a leasing office that'll be along South Street. Along South Street, there's required first floor commercial. So the street level commercial that has to be 50 feet in depth. So to do apartment amenities such as a leasing office or these apartment entrances and vestibule lobbies is a special use request, kind of similar to what the Boulevard did there. We do have some questions on if this could be relocated kind of to the 67th court. We brought that up to the developer, who I think struggled a little bit to make it work on the interior side of this with stairwells. We still think it could be done. It would maybe kind of rearrange all of the interiors, but we think it could be kind of along 67th, and then could also kind of bring some aspect to the first floor to kind of bring some pedestrian activity along 67th. With that being said, it's only about 18 feet. It's a little over 18 feet of frontage they're utilizing for that space. For a little over 71 feet is still going to be the restaurant frontage. So the majority of that South Street is really still retail, commercial, and restaurant frontage, along with the outdoor dining we'll have next to that. So that'll be a special use for that lobby. They do have a leasing office that's about 138 square feet, so a pretty small office space there. There's no bathroom attached to that. We believe to meet building codes that they would not be able to share with the restaurant, just due to different ownership, different hours, different entrances, that they would either have to decide to find space to add a bathroom. It could even be a pretty small bathroom, as long as it meets the ADA code. I believe it could be, they don't need to build a men's and a women's. It can be just one bathroom stall there. Or the alternative is, could they get rid of the leasing office? There's about 39 units here, so it's not that big where they couldn't operate without an on-site leasing office. While they're leasing these out, they could kind of utilize an apartment or the lounge area or something else as their kind of leasing space. And then, typically how these operate is you meet on site or set up some kind of appointment, but to lease from there on out. If they want the leasing office too, we're supportive of that, but they would need a bathroom to be able to go in there. So looking for that to hopefully be resolved. Just here's a quick overview of that kind of first floor plan, give you a visual of what that looks like with the restaurant, the parking, the lobby, the restaurant receiving area, and then the stairwells. The second floor plan with the roof terrace, and then the majority of apartments. The third and fourth floor plan, again, all apartments there, 2-bedroom and 1-bedroom. On the fifth floor plan with the 6 apartments, a 734 square foot exercise room, and then a little over 600 square foot lounge room, and then a roof terrace there as well. That goes out kind of in front of the exercise and the lounge rooms and kind of in between them, creating a little shared outside area there. And then a roof plan, which is pretty blank, but we'll have parapets to hide the mechanical equipment on the rooftop. Access to the site is, so there's the interior parking garage, and you'd enter off the 67th to the southeast corner of this property. You'd enter off the 67th into the parking garage and then either go up or down, kind of right there at the entrance. We do have, unlike most other developments in our downtown, this does kind of empty straight onto a sidewalk and a roadway, so we do have some concerns there that there could be conflicts, especially with vehicles exiting, with pedestrians that are on that sidewalk. So as someone's turning in, you can see pedestrians on the sidewalk. As you're turning out, you're going to have some kind of blank spots. There's nothing kind of indicated on the plans, but the petitioner has kind of said they would add mirrors to this, but that's all we've kind of set with now. Signage or audible signals or something else that are typically used in this situation. Not sure if that's what'll work here. Maybe some combination of all of those could work, just to warn not only pedestrians but also let vehicles see the pedestrians. Internal stop sign as well, to make sure vehicles stop before they're leaving. Loading, so there's a restaurant receiving door that's along 67th Court, just north of that garage entrance. That door is going to be right along what's likely to be a no parking zone. The right-of-way there gets pretty slim, so there's really not room for a loading zone or parking on the street. So anything that's parked there kind of reduces that to a 1-lane road. There's kind of a similar situation whenever there'd be a resident moving in that has a truck too, that there's really no immediate location around this building on the streets where they'd be able to load. So we're just looking for clarification of how and where these truck locations would be. That might have to be down the street or across the street, but where they would park, have some kind of plan where they'd be able to tell residents and their commercial tenants that this is where you load, to not have illegal parking. That could happen there along 67th or South Street. So we understand usually you can make it work, but we just kind of want to see where's the situation that works here, that would allow proper right-of-way lists and loading. For the trash, which is one of our kind of major concerns here, is that basically the only trash area indicated there on the southwest corner, the bottom of your screen here, outlined in red. So that's kind of where all the resident trash collects. So they have garbage chutes on each floor, and that goes into that trash area. There is no trash area indicated for the restaurant, but it's kind of been noted that this would be either in or near that receiving area for the restaurant, but that they don't have any access into the parking garage or that existing trash area. The concern with that area is that it's pretty small, so if that trash area is shared between the two, it doesn't really function well because you can only fit kind of one, maybe two small dumpsters in there. commercial, especially restaurants, tend to generate a lot of garbage. So we also have concerns about trucks entering this site. Their initial idea was that trucks would be actually coming into this garage, but the turning radiuses and kind of ceiling heights and stuff make that pretty difficult. So we've kind of recommended they work with the trash hauler that would be working on the site to see how they operate and kind of what's the best setup for them that they can do on this site. Hopefully not the situation we're trying to avoid is that they're bringing trash out to the sidewalk or to the curbs, and that in the mornings when people are going to the train station that there would be any type of trash or dumpsters out there. So trying to get some clarification of how this will work without that situation happening. As it kind of stands right now, we don't feel confident that that wouldn't happen, that there wouldn't be dumpsters rolled out there, or there wouldn't be trash toters out there. That could be pretty significant, again, for 39 apartments and then the commercial space. So that's kind of one of our open items that we're really trying to look for some clarification on here. So architecture, we do have concerns here. So I'll kind of just start off with saying with the open items. So we do have concerns with the large expanses of brick that are kind of on the first floor, on the west, south, and then east elevations. On the north elevation, the kind of front one, there's a lot of windows. That's the commercial space, but the other ones, especially on the first floor, lack any type of lack a lot of detail there that make it seem like an inviting building. So especially along 67th Street, where you're going to have pedestrians, that kind of fronts the boulevard development, and then that's on the east side. On the west side is this building will be visible at least partially from Oak Park Avenue. So the Citibank property has half a bank and then half of it's a parking lot right now. So at least some of that would be visible. There's quite a bit of brick that's down there, and we do understand that it's a difficult situation here with them putting the parking in the envelope of the building. You really don't want windows to a parking garage, so there are some difficulties there just in that overall design. The other concern we have is just in general with the kind of window locations, sizes, and the appearance of those windows. Just not feeling like there's a flow there in their current design. And maybe they could be a little bit bigger. The windows can really bring an architectural appeal to a building when they're done correctly. And then just in general, that kind of overall architecture, there's a little bit of a harsh, hardline look to their current design. And is there anything else that they can kind of do to brighten that up? I think the petitioner has brought some new ideas today, so we've kind of told them of these concerns. So I know they have worked a little bit on it. They may be able to explain a little bit more of that here after I'm done. We can work on that, but we do have concerns. Here's just kind of that overall view of what it looks like in the windows, kind of that first floor. Here's on the left is the east side along 67th with the parking garage door, and then on the right is what would be facing Citibank and then Oak Park Avenue. So here's that north elevation on South Street, the east elevation again on 67th Court with the restaurant receiving door, and then the parking garage door, the west elevation facing Citibank and Oak Park Avenue, and then the south elevation, which faces kind of that Moda Visual Arts building. And then just for comparison purposes, this is kind of that original depiction of what we were kind of originally drawn to in this building. There seemed to be a little bit more of a classic feel, I guess, to that. And then this isn't for ideas, but just as a comparison sake of what you know is going to be right next to this is that boulevard development that'll be to the east. So just for comparison purposes or reference, I put this on there just so you can kind of try and picture the two next to each other. So then there's the building height. So the legacy code limits the building height of this parcel to 4 stories. Again, this was planned to be developed with Oak Park Avenue, with that Citibank property. To the east of this is the Boulevard property and to the north of that's the North Street property that was anticipated to be a little more denser, a little more taller buildings. This will be 5 stories that they're proposing here, so it does require a variation to be 1 more story. Again, it's kind of that transition zone, so with that kind of right-of-way that's acquired here, they really front South Street and not Oak Park Avenue, so they're looking at this a little bit more like, you know, really if this was anticipated back when this plan was, it'd probably be in that 7-story. They're not planning to go to 7 stories, but they were looking for 1 more story because they're trying to fit all of the parking, the restaurant and commercial space, and then enough apartments to kind of make this financially feasible. So, and all the amenities for the apartments. So trying to jam that all in. They really couldn't do it at 4 stories, so they added a 5th story. They do step back that 5th story, so it make it a little less domineering. They step it back a few feet, do that kind of terrace. They do the terrace on kind of those residential type rooftops there on that 5th story. In general size, I believe it's only, or in exact size, it's only 4 more feet, I believe, taller in the end than the boulevard was. So just due to the parapet areas and everything on the boulevard, they end up being about the same height. It's unlikely to look out of place compared to the other kind of 4-story buildings that are in the downtown, the other mixed-use buildings that are down there that have been built over the last few years. So it's not anticipated to look out of place, but it will be 1 story higher than what's permitted there now. Landscaping, so they build out most of the building footprint, so it's pretty limited landscaping. Most of it's kept in the streetscape, which is still will be decided once we get that streetscape master plan. They do have a 5-foot separation on the west side between the Citibank property and their building, so they do kind of have this no man's land a little bit over there. So they are filling that with landscaping, 1, to kind of soften it, the look of this building from Oak Park Avenue and from that property, and then also to kind of stop any cut-through traffic or garbage buildup. So we do have some kind of concerns on the plant selection, so they really only have kind of 2 plants out there. It looks like there's a green boxwood for some of it, and then arborvitaes for the other half of it. There's purple white creeper in there as well. So we do have some kind of, if they can maybe dress that up a little bit more, especially on the corner, which will be visible again from the Vodarts building as well as Oak Park Avenue and the Citibank property. So kind of at that southwest corner, could they do something there to kind of brighten that up, as well as then just maintenance concerns with this? They seem to be filling out that entire space, so they will still need to maintain it, and how they plan on maintaining that. I guess ideas we kind of had was increasing landscaping, maybe doing something on the rooftop. They could kind of buffer the private balconies on the 2nd floor with maybe some kind of green buffer there to soften the walls that they have separating the resident rooftop terrace and those private balconies. Could they do something small in there? Maybe not a tree, but some kind of bushes or planter boxes. And then could they do something on the roof that maybe softens that architecture? This is an example of something that's in Downers Grove, just of a trellis that's at a similar type corner. Could they do something like that, or something on that corner and that second floor to kind of make it a little more attractive, add a little more green space or something like that. Signage, so they proposed, basically this plan that says they propose to meet the lighting code. Typically with a project of this size, we usually want to see some kind of uniformity between all of the signage. So they're only planning on having one tenant, but they also have the Bremen Station, the apartment signage that'll be over that entrance. So we want to see some kind of plan for them. It doesn't need to be a very large uniform sign plan, but can they pick some kind of signage that blends well with this building? You know, the box signs aren't allowed, but there would be some signage I could see being out of place on this building. They kind of just show channel letters with gooseneck lighting on these elevations. I think that would be a good idea to stick with. But if they have other ideas, at least making sure that it's uniform between all the signage, so there's not mixed and matched signage up there ever. So we're looking for some kind of them to actually put together a uniform sign plan similar to what the Boulevard did. The Boulevard obviously had more tenant spaces, but this one has really two that could have different signage. So. And if they just follow the code, there are different wall signage types they could do. So we'd prefer something a little more uniform. Just throwing that out there for your guys' feedback as well as theirs to see if they could do that. For parking on this site, the code requirements are one covered stall for each residential unit they have. There's no parking stalls required for street level commercial. So the total proposed is 41 covered spaces for the 39 units. So they do have 2 additional spaces that they've kind of have the they could have 2 accessible spaces and still have enough spots for standard parking spaces for those 39 units. They are proposing to have 6 compact vehicle spaces and 33 standard spaces, 2 accessible spaces. The compact spaces were put in there to kind of gain those 2 extra parking spaces. So that way, if for some reason they do have a third person who needs an accessible space, they won't either have to deny them that or they won't go under the numbers. So that gave them a little bit of a buffer. The compact spaces are being utilized as to meet their minimum parking requirements, though. We had some concerns with that. The Boulevard had compact parking, but didn't utilize that as the required one. In this one, they're required spaces, but they're also just for apartments. So they will be assigned, there'll be residents only parking there. We'll know what kind of vehicles are gonna be parking there. So we think it could work in this situation, especially since it's gonna be a resident pulling in and out of that space every day, the same one. So they'll kind of know it's smaller, and they can kind of pick and choose what cars they go there. The specifics of how they pick what cars and who gets those, I don't know. I assume they'll just be, if they put down a small car, they're going to give it one of those spaces, or if they get some kind of discount. Either way, we think it could work, though. So there is a variation for those 6 parking stalls. They would be 8 foot by 16 foot instead of our standard 9 foot by 18 foot in length. So 9 foot wide, 18 foot in length, so regular. We're reducing that to 18 by 16. So we have recommended that they maybe, similar to what came up on the Boulevard project, we recommend that they maybe try and find some way to have some of those parking spaces easily converted into electrical vehicle charging locations. So that doesn't mean they have to put electrical chargers in there, but could they run conduit and kind of have them set up and ready to go? And then if there is any parking concerns with this, we maybe recommend some kind of a parking study for this location. This staff doesn't have any immediate concerns, but if there are any kind of lingering parking concerns with this site, that's what we'd recommend. Bike parking, so they've proposed bike parking on the public right-of-way, so they do require they have bike parking in the basement for 40 bikes. They have 39 residential units, so every unit will have a place to store a bike interior to the site. The commercial space is required to have one bike parking space. They have a bike rack out front of that space, and the public right-of-way that would have about, I think it's four spots to park a bike there. That specific location, as shown, may not work because it has a potential to put a bike overhanging the curb. But we didn't really have them change it since this is all kind of up to the final streetscape and final engineering plan. So we have that master streetscape plan. Bike racks will be part of that as well. And then as they get permits and as they do engineering, we can kind of find where that bike rack works best at. So. The lighting, so they do have kind of the gooseneck barn light that'll be out in front of the building. This is pretty similar to what you see up and down Oak Park Avenue in a few locations. It's the same one kind of that the SIP wine bar project was using. I believe Mickey's and Ed and Joe's, they all kind of have this similar gooseneck style, gooseneck barn light, gooseneck light. Then they'll also be utilizing the column lights similar to what you see up and down Oak Park Avenue and in the downtown for the streetscape. That'll be finalized with the streetscape plan. They have wall sconces as well on the building. We don't have a cut sheet for that, so before the next meeting we need that cut sheet as well as just a photometric plan showing that the lighting works out here and that there won't be any glare or excessive light that spills off the property onto the roadways. So with this project, again, there's a part of the right-of-way that would be vacated and then given to the developer that'll help them develop their site here. Otherwise would be a pretty, the current setup's pretty confusing out there. I think anyone that's driven through it has been confused as to why that setup was the way it is.
Yeah.
So this will kind of formalize a T intersection over there. It'll be a little bit safer, a little less confusing. Also allows this property to have a little bit more commercial space than I think they'd be able to fit in otherwise. So this is the plat that vacates that. That'll be in front of you. And then there's kind of the final plat of subdivision that takes that area that's being vacated, ties it to the parcels below this, and makes it one single lot. So that'll be the final plat of subdivision being approved as well.
Final plat calls for taking the two lots plus the vacated triangle and combining into a single lot?
Correct. Yeah. Well, yeah. So it says lot 1 and lot 2 below, kind of on this. That's actually one lot. I don't know why it's exactly shown like that, but right now it's subdivided.
Is it currently a single pin?
Yes, there's one pin out there. So I think that's just showing what was previously 2 lots. That's currently 1 now. So that lot that Bremen Cash Store was on will be combined with that vacated single lot here. Our engineer has reviewed this and actually worked with their engineer, I think, on developing where that line goes to kind of make sure the sidewalks line up on both sides of the street, that it gives us the right-of-way width that we need while giving them kind of as much as we could to have them fit the commercial space as well as the outdoor dining in there. So our attorneys are currently reviewing it, so by the public hearing we should have any final comments on this at that time. I believe that's it for our staff report. give it back to you if you want to give it to the petitioner, or I think they have a little bit of a presentation they plan on making on some of these open items.
All right, Dan, thank you for your presentation. I think, who's going to speak for the petitioner? This is a workshop. I assume staff is going to explain what this is all about. It's not a formal hearing. So if you have something that you want to present in addition to what they've gone through before we get into the Q&A, by all means. Like I said, it's not a formal hearing, but what's your name?
JC Chi, I'm the architect working with our developer.
JC?
JC is my name. I'm with Quo Diedrich Chi out of Atlanta.
All right.
And so I'm very familiar with the Boulevard project as well. But I wanted to address a couple of the items here that are open, and starting off by just kind of getting us up to date with. We've worked very closely with Dan and the rest of the staff in conjunction with this workshop. A lot of these open items we're very familiar with, and we're continuing to work on them. And so the ultimate goal is to just, in the spirit of working together on the design, is to come up with a design that both Tinley Park and ourselves will be happy with. And so we understand there's some work still to be done. We plan to do that in preparation for the November the 1st hearing. And then a couple things I will update us on based on Dan's presentation is regarding the Vogt Visual Arts Center and the parking spaces. I did have a conversation a couple hours ago with both Sean Roby as well as Ryan Veldich, I think, from their office. But we are currently working through that, and so what ultimately we're hoping to do is have them agree with the 5 parallel spaces that we're proposing, and that there isn't an alternate plan that they're proposing that conflicts with that. So we plan to have that approval, I believe, in writing, Dan, is what was requested, sometime early next week. So we should have that taken care of. Regarding the concern about the trash and operations, to that extent, we do share the same concern. I will clarify, though, and it was probably my fault for not describing the scenario clearly on the phone last time Dan and I spoke. Probably the best thing, let me go ahead and flip to the floor plans. Let's see. Okay, so this is the main level plan that shows the restaurant space to the left, and then the first level parking deck to the right. You'll see that at the trash room location that Dan pointed out by the stair core on the lower right-hand corner of the drawing, that is the resident stair. That's the resident trash room that's located underneath the vertical trash chute. Okay, so that's just meant for residential use, that location. I live in a 94-unit condo building, and we empty our trash, so almost 3 times, well, more than twice the number of residents, and we empty our trash bins. There are 3 3 by 6 bins in our room, and we empty that out every other day. Okay, but mind you, we are reaching out per recommendation to our private garbage carrier, and we may have some updates here, but we have worked through this to where they have agreed in principle that they have no problem with, they're not going to bring their trucks in this is for the residential use first and foremost. We are going to have our maintenance staff and or the trash receiver will come in, leave the truck outside. Granted, that's another issue we need to deal with, but we will not be storing any of our trash bins out on the right-of-way. They'll be kept in the trash room until the time of pickup, and they will be carted out to the trucks and uploaded onto the waste removal trucks. That's for the residents. Our strategy for the restaurant space is on the middle upper portion of the drawing. You'll see the little L-shaped stair that leads down to some back-of-house storage below. But to the right of that is our receiving room that will be receiving all of our inventory as well as in that conditioned space will be where we kept our bag trash until trash pickup through the double doors will be walked out or carted out to the disposal service. So that is the strategy. We have confirmation from our proposed waste removal company that that would work for them. And so to whatever extent we need to clarify that for our hearing and resolve any concerns that the staff would have, we're more than willing to provide whatever information is necessary for that. Okay. I would like to elaborate a little bit about the setback variation of the one-story restaurant terrace that you see to the left-hand side of this second floor plan here. Some of our inspiration to do that was to, number one, Dan is correct, we wanted to keep the footprint of the apartments as rectangular of a shape as possible, just for efficiency of circulation and exit stair locations, and not to have odd-shaped units. But we also had two other motivations. One that I thought of from the beginning was to acknowledge the original roadway that's actually, if you take the line of the left facade of the apartments, that's basically 174th Street running straight to the east. And so some idea was to allow for the round rotunda of the boulevard to be seen from Oak Park beyond this one-story restaurant element, so it would be tucked behind, and to almost have an ode to where the original right-of-way was for the odd-shaped triangular median that's out there, almost as you would add an addition onto an original building, that the one-story restaurant was in some ways, from a massing standpoint, an addition to the original building that would have been there, creating the edge to 174th Street. And I'll show you a rendering. One of our renderings does show, you'll see on the left rendering of the two, you can see the round rotunda of the boulevard in the far left distance there. So there was a little bit of acknowledgement from a massing standpoint and from a pedestrian experience standpoint of one building leading toward the other on the ground plane, but then massing-wise pulling away so that you can view the boulevard, and it would draw you towards the train station side of South Street. And it was encouraged by staff that we do utilize that triangular roof terrace above the restaurant, so we feel that having a resident amenity there would be dynamic and create vitality there, and we're welcoming any other ideas to further develop how that can be an enhancement to the streetscape. Let's see, another thing I will say about the resident entrance regarding retail and commercial that is proposed to be 18 feet of residential entrance versus the restaurant. We acknowledge that is a special use request that we have. Our notion to that extent is that by locating the resident entrance on you can see in the same left rendering there, that's the entrance there alongside the storefront windows for the restaurant to the left there, is that'll actually help vitalize South Street to that extent, because all of our residents are coming in and out of that lobby there from the pedestrian standpoint. And so we feel that that's actually also still accomplishing the spirit of that requirement, is to create energy and pedestrian circulation along that portion of South Street. So that's the intent there. Dan is correct that that's located at the end of our U-shaped hallways of the apartments above, where the exit stair is. So by considering a lobby entrance over on 67th Court, which would essentially be, right in the middle on the upper portion, would interrupt the apartments that would continue along 67th Court, but it would also create the requirement for a third set of stairs, though, and an elevator lobby right in the middle there. By Dan describing that would be extremely interventive on the efficiency of the apartment floor plans is correct. Architecturally, we understand that large expanses of brick walls are visually not desirable. And I frankly, we pursued these renderings and these angles to show, what is attractive and what's not. So you can see how on the left rendering, you could see the projected balconies that are there. That's over the Vogt Visual Arts Center. And those projected balconies do create some dimension and some layering that adds some visual interest. But if you go around the corner right above our garage door entrance, you can see the expanse of wall mass there. And so we're toiling with knowing that aesthetically we should add more windows. But functionally speaking, they don't land in great spots within the unit plan. So we're having to navigate between the two. And over to the right rendering, you'll see that that's actually an exit stair in that corner there. And so we're trying to negotiate between having windows into an exit stair where you have the sloping stair running right in front of a window with the functionality of whether that really makes sense. But we understand the aesthetic need to dress up those facades. So as Dan mentioned, we are looking at some remedies. And this is just exploratory. What we did here is these are the 4 elevations that you can first notice that along the ground floor, first level, we looked at changing the material coloration to a lighter color along the streetscape versus the red brick that was originally there. You can see here the current renderings show the red brick on the ground floor there, up 4 stories. And then this next set of elevations where we're more than happy to look at the coloration that would be different along the ground floor. And that obviously provides a little more visual interest, some variation there. We're still exploring what exact material that is. But again, this is just to display that we are wanting to work with the staff on trying to make these more aesthetically pleasing. You'll also see that in the upper right-hand elevation, the long one on the upper right-hand side, which is our east elevation, 67th Court side there, I've added windows there. I don't know if there's not a pointer on here, is there, Dan?
No.
Okay, so you'll see right above the garage door, right in the center, right above there are another row of vertical windows, 3 windows there that we've used there to break up the wall mass that on the left-hand side you'll see is just blank brick. We found a location within those master bedrooms to put another window there. And then you'll see on the same drawing on the right-hand side, over to the far right-hand side, before you hit the 1-story restaurant to the right, another set of windows there that go vertically, the middle ones of the 3 that are on that right corner there. And if I could find, okay, so the right rendering you see there, you see the 2 windows separated by brick wall mass vertically in between there that go up to 2nd, 3rd, and 4th floors. We're proposing to place a window right in the middle of those. And you'll see that on that upper right-hand rendering there. On the lower left-hand rendering into the stairwells, we're looking at adding windows there. And ultimately, without getting into too much detail, what we're trying to show is the spirit of adding more windows. Even though functionally it's compromising, but we acknowledge that from an aesthetic standpoint, it improves the overall look of the building. Having said that, what our intention is to work with staff over this next week so that we can come up with an amicable solution for the aesthetics of all the architecture by the time we have our hearing on the 1st. And then just to finish up, residential amenities. We plan to have a lounge area for the residents, some indoor recreation, fitness, bike storage. Some of these images probably look familiar to you. And then roof terrace amenity as well. And again, as Dan pointed out, this is meant to be a high-end rental product here, and we feel that market would be is desirable, obviously, from our standpoint, from a resident use, but also from hopefully from Tinley Park's point of view as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse. Appreciate it. Is anybody else going to be speaking this evening?
presentation-wise, I mean, we may have questions.
You know, I'll add one thing.
Sure.
I just want to introduce myself too. I'm Vince Tessitore, and I'm from the law firm of Lindell and Tessitore. I'm the owner of the property, or my entity is, but I also represent the developer. The developer's name is Bremen Station LLC. Just one footnote to the refuse, the trash removal issue, is I did talk with a gentleman named John Evenhouse. He's from New Way, the local trash collector, and he did say that the plan for pulling up a truck to the commercial receiving door is acceptable. He would actually have his guys with the key from us come into the commercial receiving door, wheel out the trash bins, and then load them onto the truck. So the truck is never entering into the building. And the same thing for the residential. They would have a key fob or some sort of key, and they would roll out the trash bins to their trucks from the residential area too. So it seems like we have an acceptable solution, and that the local trash company is on board with that. So that's all I have, unless you guys have any questions for me or us.
I have one question.
Sure.
Did they say, do they currently do that for anybody else?
You know, I didn't ask him that. He has been the sales rep, though, for the Tinley Park area for over 20 years, and it did seem that that was normal for a situation like this when I talked to him.
Right.
But I didn't specifically ask him for other examples. So,
All right, thank you.
sure.
And that was part of our concern too, of why we kind of wanted them to talk, is Tinley's not an area where these developments with
Right.
interior trash
Right.
like that exist, but there is other areas around here, Homewood or Orland Park areas that have similar buildings. And I know New Way is, I think also with Homewood Disposal, they have a pretty large range, but we just wanted to make sure they were comfortable with
Or is there other
wheeling
properties?
stuff in and out and having keys and things like that.
Sure.
So.
Is there other properties that you currently have that similar to this?
I've been involved with other projects that do it the same way. So, you know, we either, you know, the typical scenario is to give them a key fob. It's typically
Right.
an electronically operated receiving door that they just use the key to come in. You know, the only issues we've run into with that is they will not push the trash bins up a ramp. For instance, if the trash is on the basement level,
Right.
you have to have someone push it up to grade level. But in this situation, both areas for the trash bins are at grade level. So, okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Vince, if you don't mind,
Sure.
a few more questions though. New Way, did they say where the vehicle would be parked? I mean, I assume it's going to be on that.
You know, they haven't even seen the plan, so we just discussed it generally, that
Sure.
the trash vehicle would pull up to beside the receiving door on, you know, either the commercial area or the residential area, and that the guys would come in just like they pull up to any side of a building for commercial trash service, and they would enter on their own and exit on their own. So,
Okay, thank you.
okay, thank you.
So we'll be tracking through all the commissioners, see if there are any questions, but as long as we've had a few questions on this topic, you know, we can kind of run through this, just make sure that we address any questions or concerns from any of the commissioners.
Okay.
I'll jump in myself. I had a thought as I was going through the plan and I was looking at some of the elevations on this. And I know I get the residential part, that kind of makes sense to me. You know, there's a big overhead door. And I was just curious about how practical it is for a restaurant, even though I know it's not a massive restaurant, it's a decent sized restaurant. How practical is it to be manually carrying the trash through a double door, probably kind of like what we have over here in this room? Is that really a practical solution? My thought was, I've seen, I work downtown, so I've seen the kind of thing where they'll have a small overhead door that opens, and much like we would have for the residential,
Yeah.
small dumpster.
Sure.
I would just think that would be more convenient. And also, looking at the elevation, I just kind of had a thought that would additionally break up the massive brick there on that first level.
Good point. Yes, those doors, the double doors, as we're showing them now, do happen to be in a bay. That we have the recessed brick look. we do expect that there will be the 3 by 6 foot bins in the receiving area of the restaurant too, just like the residential. These will not be parked underneath a trash chute. The verticality isn't necessary for the restaurant. However, that's how typically our restaurateurs will bag all the paper products and all the packaging products, because all the food goes disposal, okay? So all the empty packaging products and everything else, trash, will be bagged, and usually a 64-gallon bin like that can hold anywhere from 6 to 8 bags of trash. And so they will wheel that out to the truck to be disposed of when the time comes. Either them or, as Vince has mentioned, the trash company will take it out. So it's not a matter of people laboriously dragging bags out as much as it is restaurateurs oftentimes have their own ways of dealing with, grease trap removal, cleaning, trash disposal, and other things like that.
Okay.
Okay.
Good. It sounds like you have given us some thought, so then.
Yeah.
Yeah, JC, and it sounds like from what Vince said that, the conversations with New Way has just been that, like, no site plan has been necessarily seen by them. I'm just curious, you mentioned before an estimation of your own complex being 9 stories. You assume this would be probably every 3 days. How many numbers of bins? What would be the estimated pickup times and number of pickups throughout the week? The reason I ask too is on the times, you got commuters coming into the train station. You also have residents leaving to get to work. So you don't want to block sight lines coming out of already tight spot with where you're suggesting putting mirrors and whatnot.
Yep.
On a morning rush hour or even an evening rush back. So, I'm sure that's very fluid right now. But
yeah. Respectfully, what we'd like to do is, because Vince just spoke with these trash removal people recently.
Right.
We'd like to share specifics with them, like we have with the Park District regarding their parking spaces, and really get down to a solution rather than just a scenario. Respectfully, we'd like to go ahead and continue to explore that with them, share it with the staff as soon as we have even a diagram on a site plan to show you what our strategy is. We'd like to be more tangible than just an explanation, and it's going to take some due diligence for us to shake that out.
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
And that traffic flow in the morning is very critical.
Understood.
Yep.
Understood.
And just a side note to that, when I did speak with Mr. Evenhouse, one of my concerns was whether they could pick it up often enough. We have the same concern as you do. Obviously, we're not wanting to interrupt the pedestrian-friendly flow at any time, especially during the times you mentioned. He did say that in terms of my concern about being able to pick it up often enough, that they could pick it up as much as 6 days a week. Obviously, we don't expect it to be picked up that much, but I guess the point is that they can accommodate whatever we need.
That's good.
I don't think it's out of the question to be able to come up with a scenario, even in terms of time frames within a day. So give us some time to work on that. We're happy to be as specific as we can be in preparation for the hearing.
Appreciate that. So on that note, and this probably goes for a lot of the items that you're working out with the staff. Knowing the area down there, it's an unusual lot, and in terms of what the immediate neighbors are, you have Citibank, which is on the west side, which in large degree is not all that, from my perspective, it's not really highly impacted by this development, based on just the way it's lining up, and then you have the metro lot across the street, the boulevard's going to be the other way. And I do notice Mr. Brady's here as one of the businesses right there near the Boat Visual Arts Center. So there's, in terms of the number of entities impacted there, it's not really huge. But in the interest of all of those, I would ask that to the extent it's not already happening, that those neighbors be included in those discussions for the major impacting things, such as trash and all of that. Because you guys may work it all out, it may seem fine, they come day of the public hearing and then forget.
Sure, it can only help if we're aware of and sharing information. Sure.
Great. So before we move on to any of the other items, were there
on the subject of what we just discussed here for the trash. Any questions, comments?
Nope.
Trash, no. Great. So I myself have a couple of things noted here, but I hope that as we go through the rest of the commission, you guys are going to ask all my questions. So we'll start down here. Commissioner Manny, do you have any points that
Yes, yes, I do.
And then to the extent the other commissioners have comments on it, we'll do that.
Okay. In looking at the plan, this is just in looking to see to break up that brick expanse on the east side. Looking at the plan for the restaurant, I'm not seeing the second means of egress because it's a large space. So we're definitely going to need that. So, and I'm thinking, could that be somehow located on the east side to break up the expanse? Maybe in within a bay. It could be a door. It could provide some type of storefront, spandrel glazing.
Good point. Good point.
Something
Yes,
to break it up.
Absolutely.
Or maybe even continuing maybe the whole west side or part of it, continue the storefront from the restaurant, return it, could turn the
Sure.
corner just to break it up some.
And to that note, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we are, as we get further into discussions with the restaurateur, what we're showing is just storefront bay windows.
Right.
Well, obviously could become operable. They could become doors within the window system,
Right,
whatever.
right.
So those remain to be determined. However, the spirit of what you're saying makes sense, and we'll obviously look for opportunities to get more
Right.
fenestration where we can.
Right. But definitely, again, the second means of egress. And then, again, looking at the plan, the receiving doors, I think those doors are swinging in the wrong direction.
Mhm.
Because if that's going to be the back of the house, obviously, if there's some type of emergency, doors got to swing out.
Okay.
And then just one comment on the second floor. Again, just plan-wise, and not really, regarding the exterior of the building, but just looking the corridor that leads out to the residence roof terrace.
Mm-hmm.
Just for accessibility, I believe that the way it's drawn, is not accessible. That door, for anybody, wheelchair or. Again, just not accessible, just
Understood.
by means of the dimensions, 4-foot hallway.
Are you talking about the shared terrace or the private?
Right, the shared terrace, the
Second
triangular
floor.
piece.
You're talking about the push and pull side of the door open?
Right, just
Yeah,
in
understood.
general, because,
Yeah,
I
we'll
kind of
have to
just
tweak the
skimmed.
width of that hallway to get the push
Right,
side.
right, but again, if it remained that size, then obviously it's not accessible.
Okay. Mhm.
So, but that was my point for, my main point was for the exterior, just to see if we could break that up. Definitely
Right.
need to find that a second means of egress.
Okay. Thank you.
That's all I have.
So my question is with the parking. Okay, so you have 39 units, but 41 spaces. How do you not know that everybody in the unit that has a 2-bedroom is going to have 2 cars? Because the majority of people who live in Tinley Park, both people who live there have vehicles. And there's no parking for any other car to go on a street in that area. So what's the solution for that?
Well, the easy answer, which is not probably the best spirit of the answer, is that, our first goal was to try to reach the zoning minimum requirement, which is 1 space per unit. However, we also understand that oftentimes we have to answer to the operation side of what we're trying to do. And yes, logically, the way we currently live, there are more than, different jurisdictions will have 1+ point something per space to account for the second car or a guest space. So the couple things that we're relying on, we're hoping for, which I think is also in the spirit of Tinley Park, is to be able to encourage as much alternative means of transportation as well as pedestrian and or use of the train. And so given the delicate balance between what we can provide, what we are required to provide, and what we should provide, they're all 3 different concerns.
Mm-hmm.
We feel, obviously, we've met the The second item of that is to provide the minimum required, in addition to actually two spaces. And staff was really logical in terms of, well, JC, you know, you have 2 accessible spaces, the handicap accessible spaces, but however, those really, in theory, shouldn't be counted amongst the 39 because, you know, you can't assign that to someone and then disallow someone who really needs to use it. So that made complete logical sense to us. So therefore, that's why we have the extra 2, is to allow the accessible ones to be free for public use or for, you know, for a resident that needs that. As to the question about demand, you know, I don't have an answer other than the fact that, you know, we're hoping that there's enough shared parking during in terms of the restaurant, because the restaurant does not require any additional parking for the restaurant use. And in doing so, you know, we're trying to, you know, as I mentioned, establish the balance between the minimum, the parking requirement that we have and the number of residents that the site can absorb.
The thing is, though, is you're not covering any guest parking either. And you can't park in the metro lots there at all because it's all permit parking. Mm-hmm. And there's no street parking after a certain period of time at night. So I don't know where the rest of the vehicles are going to go. If you have people over at your residence, there's nowhere for them to park.
Understood.
I will just to make 2 kind of quick notes is, one, we did find, so the 2 ADA spaces here can be converted to standard spaces to give until they're requested to be ADA spaces. So from the state, we finally got that answer that they're not required until they're requested, so that can give them 2 additional spaces until but assuming that, you know, there could be people that need accessible spaces, they would be required to stripe them as ADA.
Dan, can I ask this question based on that? Because we did discuss that as an option. Does that allow us to have 4 spaces then? Because we have the loading.
Yes, but you are required to put them in upon request. So look,
correct.
You can originally stripe them as
correct, but that would allow us to have 4 extra spaces.
Correct.
Because we have in the van accessible instance, we have 11-foot in a 5-foot zone, which is basically 2 spaces, and then we have 2 8-foot zones. So we actually have 4 additional stalls that are capable until the need arises.
Correct. We wanted to count them in as if they obviously need to be used.
Sure.
You don't want to have a situation where they go under, and they can actually do 3 ADA spaces without going under, but all of those can be standard until requested. So that at least can give them a little bit of flexibility there. I can also note that similar to the Boulevard, who is pretty tight on this, I think in the incentive agreement on that one, kind of requires them if they need more parking, they'd have to lease it from the village. So this could be another situation where maybe we could do that too, where they could actually potentially lease spaces with that parking lot could eventually be available behind the Boulevard or across the street. That could they lease spaces for us for their use. There hasn't been a village-wide plan to do that, but I know that was in that incentive agreement for Boulevard, and could be an option here.
Something you wanted to say here?
Yeah, I concur completely with Commissioner Gatto. Even if you get a few additional parking spots, what about people whose guests need the ADA parking and it's not accessible? I mean, I think early on somebody mentioned doing a parking study. I think that is a very good idea to look into that and furthermore implement one just to see if this is feasible, because like I said, I concur with Commissioner Gatto. Is it realistic to expect every family to have just 1 car, every 2-bedroom room there, and then have no guests? And parking's tight. I know, I live out there. They will ticket you. So that is something that needs to be looked at and researched a little bit more.
Well, so devil's advocate here, I guess, and this isn't really, I'm going to make an observation, and I'm not really trying to come down on defense of the developer here, but what I would say is that we have to look in terms of where the burden lies on such things. If somebody wants to have a second car, they want to have guests, they want to have a party, what have you, and whose responsibility is that? From my perspective, the developer is, for lack of a better term, taking a gamble on transit-oriented development and the demographic trends that that is leading to transit-oriented development. Inherently, by having this and having limited parking, they're limiting their own market for potential tenants. And so if a tenant is thinking about moving in there, from my perspective, they would look and say, oh, I only get one parking spot, and they look around and there's no parking, and if that matters to them, they're not going to rent there. And so the burden falls back to the developer and the operators of the space, because they're inherently limiting their own market. So the village has put a requirement of one space per unit, and if the developer complies with that, they're inherently limiting their market. If the developer wants to expand their market, they would put in twice as much parking, right? So I'm just trying to be practical and recognize where the trend, from what we hear, is going to transit-oriented development. And from my perspective, it looks like that's the gamble that the developer is taking here.
That's correct.
I don't want to speak for you,
Yeah.
but that's how I'm viewing it.
Well, that was that third point of how many spaces should we provide above and beyond what's required. And so that's the question we've been asking ourselves. Understanding that, we obviously, that's a great point, and we're obviously concerned on the operational side ourselves. Is this a real estate offering that's not sufficient for the higher end user that we're trying to get as a tenant? So all I can say at this point is we're constantly looking at innovative ways or creative ways to design more parking into the current infrastructure that we have. This is why we proposed the 6 compact spaces down in the basement level, and we were able to get 2 extra by doing that. So I guess a question I might have is, if we go towards that direction of creativity and we can get 1 additional space by even a higher percentage of compact spaces, is that something that would be desirable for those who are concerned about the guest parking? If we can get 1 more, I guess at the somewhat disbenefit of the size of each of the space. In other words, there'd be maybe 3 or 4 more compact spaces in order to get 1 additional space.
Well, so that was one of the points I had listed here, that I wanted to get consensus direction from the rest of the commission, was compact spaces. And so making sure that we have clarity on the code requirements and where the subjectivity lies. So can we get clarification on that? For instance, there's a requirement of the number of spaces. Where does it fall on how many, or is this, we talked about before about kind of gray area as far as the flexibility that the commission would have on approving the mix of compact versus standard size?
So by the code, they'd all be required to be the standard width, the 18 by 9. So it does kind of, they're requesting some mix of that.
Right.
It would be, what do you guys feel comfortable with? Can they kind of show some kind of mix? Maybe they have an engineer or parking consultant that says assuming their market, how many cars are going to be able to reasonably use that compact space? Because if they do too many, then they're limiting their market even more. Anyone with a truck can't park in there.
So in the interest of,
and they could
let's
run
get to
out.
the heart of it. we'll go to the extremes, right? If they came in, I don't know how the math would work out and how many they get if every single space was compact. I mean, they just wanted to maximize it. Looking at that extreme, that assumes that every single car is going to be compact. So somewhere in the middle, what if 50% of them are compact? So I just want to get, and this is not an absolute answer I'm looking for from the commission, but you know, do any of the commissioners have a thought one way or another? Because what they're looking for is approval for a certain number. And staff and the petitioner would probably appreciate some guidance as to if they move to increase that to a higher mix. Is the commission comfortable with what's currently on there? Or maybe the commissioners are not comfortable with that and would not want any more. So any thoughts on that?
I just think that we're not the experts on this,
Right.
all right? So that the experts are you, all right? And I'm assuming that you've have other properties or you have that, you know, access to the information to get examples and say this is how it's worked here or whatever. Or you, Dan, say, you know, what's your experience? I mean, I don't know.
Do a parking
I mean,
study.
everything that's been said is good. It sounds great. And it's, you know, it's the new trend where people aren't driving as much, right? Every Ubering and things like that. So, you know, I don't know.
There is some benefit to this space, again, that if this was compact parking in a shopping center around here, I could tell you we'd say that it's not going to work. When you get those small spaces and you have people pulling in and out of them that aren't used to that situation, and this situation with even if they put in, let's say, a visitor spot or something, that would need to be standard. So there is some comfort level there that these are going to be residents. They're going to have an assigned spot and they're going to know how to pull in after they're going to learn a little bit as they go. So to some degree, we're comfortable with the 6 they're proposing. Would a few more hurt? I don't think 3 or 4 more would hurt this, but also a little unsure if they're starting nearing 50% of what's the actual vehicle makeup of people that are going to park here, and how much would that limit their market.
So I don't want to get stuck on this one point, but
Sure.
you know, obviously it's a concern. I'll just say for my part, I don't know what the number is. I agree with Commissioner Staton. We probably need some professional feedback on it and input. I would just say, just as a layman, understanding what I see out there and have experienced in terms of what people are driving and all that. And then, as Dan mentioned, we're talking about people who live there every day, and you don't necessarily have to design it for whatever might drive in there, right? I myself would feel comfortable with slightly more. I would be okay with that. And now the number, I don't know what that is.
I mean, in reality, you can always restripe a parking lot. If you find that you get a lot of residents, I mean, it's not hard to take that paint off, right?
Right, yeah.
So you could change it down the road and we would never know.
You know what,
As long as
that's
they're
an
meeting the
excellent point.
minimum.
Interior parking, a private parking garage, how would we ever know if you guys went and changed the stripes?
Yeah, and that's an
They're
excellent
gonna
point,
do what's
because they're
best.
meeting the code based on the
We
standard
need-
size.
They're showing that they
So-
can meet the code.
So to your point, to a degree, it doesn't really matter.
Yeah, well, technically there's a code requirement, but yes, they could switch that around and maybe
So-
make it work.
It's an important thing to consider. I just want to make sure that the staff and petitioner have enough information from the commission to go back and figure out what the final proposal is.
One just note on all this, though, if there is a guest parking spot, they have to do an ADA spot then, striped in. So the reason why you don't have to have any ADA striped until a request is because there's no visitor parking. So if they do add a visitor spot, they have to add one ADA spot that would be a guest spot as well.
Fair point.
So
Something for you
if
guys
they
to
add one,
figure out.
they're actually going to be taking 3 spaces as visitor spaces. One that would be an ADA space that would take up 2 standard. So just to note that.
Commissioner Gatto, any other points there?
So this doesn't really have anything to do with any of the open items, but I guess I'm a little concerned that the majority of the developments that have been coming downtown have been apartments. Plus we just had a huge development that came out off of 191st Street. I don't understand what the thinking is of people renting these days. The mortgage interest rates are so incredibly low that your payment would be lower in a house or owning a condo than it would be renting. So I don't understand what, like, being a developer, what makes you go the apartment route instead of creating condominiums?
Yeah.
So my understanding, and I've had that discussion with the developer and other developers like this developer, and part of the market, part of the reason is that this is a market that's geared more towards millennials. It's also geared towards empty nesters. Of course, families are welcome, but it's typically the type of product that is more interested in by millennials and empty nesters. And the millennials especially are not wanting to buy yet. I mean, they're still in sort of the typical temporary situation where they don't want to make that type of commitment. The other reason for this particular developer is that there is no established condo market in Tinley Park. So there's a greater risk in trying to move forward, at least presently, in trying to sell a building of condos. You can't have both. You have to either condoize it and sell condos, or else make it an apartment and rent all of the apartments. So the developer does, in fact, want to entertain at some point in the future making these apartments condos, and they're actually sort of set up very nicely to be converted into condos, but there just isn't a market for that right now, and the risk of trying to sell all of these as condos is too great for that. So.
Okay.
And that's similar to
the
what...
same question was asked at the Boulevard, if you recall, and very similar response from my perspective. With only 39 units, condo conversion in this type of situation would actually be much easier.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something we can't regulate.
Yeah.
Correct.
I was just wondering why people are going
to
to
apartment. The
apartment.
residences with the developer, and there's those condos over there. The gentleman that I was with actually helped do the work over there. He said more than half of those are now rented. Those condos are rented. Because that condo, and that's in an isolated area of town where you don't have the benefit of a train and the energy of a downtown.
Mm-hmm.
Those condos are struggling, and they're nice from the exterior that I've seen, and I know they tell me the price points, but the majority of them are now being rented.
Yeah, and one other note on that is once you make it a condo building, you can only rent up to 30% of those condos. So it's hard to go backwards into the apartment market.
I will say to that end, though, I would say it's probably not exaggerating. I would say we're probably juggling right now 4 or 5 apartment products versus for sale products in our firm right now that we're designing. But all of those, even the apartment product, we are designing as condominiums so that the developer has the opportunity to sell them off if that's their intention. So to that end, that's part of our charge, is to provide a higher end amenity. That's why we're amenitizing all these to where it would be like a condominium building, is so it gives the developer that flexibility.
Yeah. Okay. That was all the questions I had.
All right. Okay, let's see. My parking stuff has been taken care of. Let's see here. One thing that was brought up was dealing with that exit door from the indoor parking area out onto the street and the safety-ness of it. And I will do quite a bit of work downtown and using the mirrors and stuff like that. But there's always other things as well, it seems like, with those buildings. Now, maybe an audible thing is not the best for that area with the residences. It's not a
Yeah.
busy, thing, but some sort of lighting to flashing light stuff should definitely be considered for when a vehicle is coming out. When that door opens, something, so it's from both ways. And even something visible, so where if somebody was maybe even coming out of that, the Voc lot, they would just have an idea that that door is opening up, and because nobody's going to be able to see if anybody's coming out of there when they go through. So just something, something more than just the mirrors, and not everybody knows how to use those things.
I might look at a way to also maybe could provide a fenestration opportunity there, is maybe provide even a window on either side. So it gives a little bit more peripheral vision as a car to exit, and that will help the fenestration aspect. But again, we're looking at innovative ways to be cost conscious with the construction side of things, but to add not only in this case would be functional reason to do that, but also would help on the aesthetics too.
I do like when you were going through your presentation there, and you had the different colors with the different levels, like how the lower levels were a lighter color and then darker higher up. And, I think it does make a big difference compared to some of the stuff we do have here. I think it makes it it does break it up a little bit, makes it a little bit more pleasing to look at. Having that lighter stuff down lower like that, I think it does make a big difference. The addition of those windows, like over the doors, that one there. And then the addition of those windows, like over where the bay door is for the parking, and the other ones that you talked about adding, I think they do make a big difference in just the appearance of the building. And instead of having those big brick, masses there, that does help. So something like that, the different colors would be nice, and then the way it ties in with up top and things like should definitely be considered in some of the final stuff here. I do think that that little outdoor area for the what would be the second floor, walking out on the second floor there, the first residential floor, is a kind of nice, unique aspect for that, and it's on a good point, with the things that do go on downtown between the different events we have down there. But something else on there too, the ideas, I think Dan had put in the stuff about like trellis type things or something like that, just to kind of, so it's just not this flat overhang, like flat roof, with some chairs on it, is what it kind of seems from this, if we look at it from the street level, something that, just more appeal for it, and the idea of a little bit of some sort of landscape kind of thing up there is definitely, I think would help with the aesthetics on that whole thing.
I think one opportunity to that end is on the corner. We've got, Dan, can you flip to one of the perspectives that are right at the point, looking at the point, that one right there. You can see how we treated the corner by carving in the restaurant entrance. Mm-hmm. It's in a niche, so it's covered there. We can carry that cube element up vertically and make it a vertical element so that it becomes human scale up on the roof terrace as well. Even transition that into, so it becomes an anchor right on the corner. Could be an interesting treatment for that.
Something just to kind of, so it doesn't look like a flat roof.
Sure.
Would definitely be.
Sure. So it'd be from
nice.
The guardrail height all the way up, and even maybe a little covered area right there, and carry the volume up. Could be an interesting formal use there.
Definitely. I know one of the other open items dealt with the entrance for the apartment part of this here on what is South Street there. Just dealing with the size of that, and I'm looking at the drawings and stuff that we've had, that we have here, it's the way it's set up and the way the plans are, it does work for it being right there. I mean, literally having to redesign the whole floor plans in order to move it over onto 67th and then redesign that whole facade and everything else, and changing the way the parking is set up probably and everything in order to do that. Personally, I don't see a big issue with it there, and compared to, just because we're not talking like it's even half the size of the restaurant footage. It's frontage there. It's 18 feet there, and then 71 feet of restaurant. I think it kind of brings it down where I think it would work on that street, and not being on 67th. For that, I think that's pretty much all I've got here. Yeah, right now that is, yeah.
Commissioner Gray.
I have a few items regarding the signage, and we're looking at a photo right now. So it's the building's going to have a sign, and then the one tenant I took to be the restaurant. But what about the
Correct.
interior space that is to be leased or potentially leased? Is that going to have an exterior sign?
Are you speaking about the leasing office?
Yes.
Okay, that's meant to be for the apartment
Oh,
leasing.
okay, fair enough.
Yes,
Okay,
okay.
For them to do business. Apologies.
Mhm.
And then the unloading of the trucks, that's for the restaurant, but that's fluid because you don't know who's going to be the
Depends
restaurant.
on the purveyor, yes.
Right. Okay, well.
But deliveries, again, we have to come up with a strategy that would make sense to us, that would be working with the staff to decide. Again, it's going to be probably treated similarly to the trash. However, we need, for us to really speak to a specific restaurant tenant, that could be down the road. But happy to come up with a strategy. But the idea is to use the same receiving room for all the inventory to be brought in. So we would have to coordinate times of day and other things, just like the trash. So it's a dual pursuit of ours to try to determine the strategy for that.
We'll talk a little bit about it.
Yeah.
It'll be a little bit different where garbage may work with them stopped on 67th. They may need to go further down with a loading truck or something, because if it's going to be parked with someone out of it compared to a garbage truck which is running with somebody in it, it's a little bit different,
It's different,
there.
yeah.
So, but we'll work with them on trying to find the best location over there where they could say, here's where your staging area is. And then maybe that'll be easier to pass on to,
Right.
any tenant that comes along. You could say, this is really where you're gonna have to
Right.
park. You can't park on South Street or 67th to load that truck, so. But we'll work with JC and his team, so.
Okay.
And then last, those balconies on that south portion of the building, that the setback has the 5 foot. And this is, I know it's not over an alley, but just as a good neighbor policy, since you've been having conversations with the Volks Visual Arts Center, Tinley Park District, as long as they're aware of that and on board, they don't have an issue with it, I think that's a good way of being just a proactive good neighbor.
Sure.
That's it.
Sure. Okay.
So.
Yeah, that's a weird, I kind of find it weird because they are allowed to encroach to 0 feet on every other property line except for the rear in the code.
Yeah.
So I think that's more because it's typically supposed to be some kind of alley or.
Right.
Just to leave a little bit of room there. And maybe if something else redevelops in the back, or there's residents in the back. But yeah, it'll be good to pass
Okay.
that along.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Commissioner Gray?
No, that's it.
Commissioner Stanton?
The only other thing I could think of, we touched on trash, and touched on the look of the building, keeping a traditional look on the building, make some changes, is security cameras. And, if that's something you were thinking of, if you weren't, I would highly recommend that you might want to look into that.
Absolutely.
So,
Yeah, it's part of our design process for all of our residential product is to encourage that, and so that's certainly, that helps on the marketing side of
Sure.
the tendency for the building to have all that secured. Yes.
great, thank you.
Okay, so I had a couple items here, and to the extent any other commissioners with just thoughts on it, please chime in. These are in no particular order. Going back to the signs, again, given that we're really talking about one primary tenant, and then the apartments themselves, have no concerns on it. I just wanted to bring up the concept of, as you look at the signs and work with staff on that, the potential for using blade signs, which is part of what the village is trying to go more towards. Right now, these are just the, what do you call them, channel signs on there. So to the extent that fits in with the theme and all that, I think that would look nice as you go forward with it.
And then also, Kimberly, would any of this, because I was thinking blade signs, would any of this be eligible for any of the Oak Park Avenue playbook funding?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we prefer to work with existing businesses and bringing non-conforming signs, but at the discretion of the committee, grants come in as a first come, first serve, so.
Because as I understand, there's no formal incentive agreement on this
There will be.
project, right?
There will be on it. It's not finalized yet or anything to that degree. Might be a little bit more by the time we have the public hearing. But yeah, they'll have incentives in this, so
Okay.
that stuff could be rolled into that in some way.
And this is really more associated with any potential incentive agreement, but I didn't, for that vacated plot, I didn't hear that, from my perspective, that's effectively an incentive. There's no consideration being given to that, right?
Correct. Not from you guys. It'll be into the incentive agreement in terms of what it's worth.
What I'm saying is the
appraisal
developer's not buying that.
Correct.
It's being given.
As part of the incentive package, yeah.
That's
It'll be.
incentive, non-monetary. All right, so just want to be clear on that point. On the plat, on the south end, it lists a vacated alley, and I just wanted to understand that, because the village has had, up and down Oak Park Avenue, we've worked hard to obtain the alleys, but in other parts, we've actually vacated a lot of alleys. And I just want to understand
Yeah,
where this falls.
So this alley probably goes back to where anywhere in the original Tinley was built with horse and buggy in mind. So they actually had actual like your horse and buggy alleys back there. So that alley was actually part of the original plat of Bremen, of the village of Bremen, that went back to the 1800s. So at some point, the village didn't want it. I didn't see exactly when it was vacated.
So that was the point I was trying to clarify.
So it's got nothing to do with our current kind of vision of an alley system.
It's not the village's.
Correct.
It's not
It was at one point. We
already
basically gave it
vacated.
back to the
It's
two
their
property.
property.
Yes, so that's just
I just
vacated
wanted to
by the village and was given back to them. There's no alley system through this block in the legacy plan, so unlike some of the other projects, there's not an alley dedication here in mind.
So you mentioned the height. That's obviously one of the things that we would need to approve here. None of the commissioners spoke to it, so I just wanted to clarify. We're talking about effectively being 1 story taller than what is allowed. I'll throw my 2 cents in. I'm comfortable with it. Does anybody here, does that give you pause, the additional story?
No, he said it was 4 foot difference from what the boulevard is, so it's
Right.
not much at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Just want to make sure that everyone's good on that. Balcony encroachments, Commissioner Gray brought that up on the south end. Does anybody have any concerns about that? Okay. I know there was some discussion on the east side, how all those balconies are flush. And was there any consideration of, to kind of add some, I don't know what you call it, interest or dimension there about potentially having some or all of those have similar balconies or something like that?
If you want to talk to that, because that's, we kind of pushed for it or wanted to see it, could you get some, even if they're kind of Juliet balconies or something like that, where something came out, but I know they had some struggles making that work, so maybe you can talk.
Well, we started out with those, you can see the 4 sets of balconies on each level. 2 are in the middle, are adjacent to each other, right? Those actually cantilevered out originally, but that was over the right-of-way.
Right.
And so we didn't want to seek a variation on that, so we pushed them back in. The spirit of that was to be able to give some variation to the facade, so you'd have some layering. But again, we were able to work out the floor plans to where we were able to get the minimum 800 square foot for those one-bedroom units and still get a usable 5.5, 6 foot deep balcony that was fully engaged in the facade. So while I agree that aesthetically it would be more pleasing to have some ins and outs, we didn't want to seek that variation because we didn't need it functionally.
Over the right-of-way was, so they originally kind of proposed that. We don't really, it doesn't exist anywhere else in the village, and we don't really have a process to take on that obligation of having permanent structures over the right-of-way. So we basically said not only a variation that just really isn't going to work, it would take a lot of effort to kind of figure out how to even make that work.
Okay.
So we said maybe could you shift the building a little bit east? Could you even get it to bump out a couple feet?
No, I mean, the big thing is I want to ask a question. It sounds like it was considered and there's practical reasons why.
It would basically mean a reduction in the unit sizes on the inside if they were to do that, I believe. So they decided
okay.
against that.
So on that, I just want to toss in my 2 cents, and I'm glad that you actually brought this up about what you had in mind, the spirit when you designed the block of the building and then the first floor, the triangle, and just conceptually you're trying to give homage to the original street that was there. I appreciate that. I'm gonna kind of leverage that and go a step further. I'm a huge fan of the original building that was there. I just think it was, at least for Tinley Park, it was, a fantastic building, and it's really such a shame, as Dan alluded to, what ended up happening with it. And for my part, this is my personal opinion, I would really think it would be great if you could go a step further and pull in some of those elements of that original design, and whether it's what they do on the first floor, with the, I'm not an architect, so I don't know what you call that kind of like the paneling, the panels. Yeah, there's better pictures around, but maybe something with the windows, or the crown on the top, some sort of element to kind of give even more of a nod to it as you're going back and looking at just I'm not talking about redo the floor plan, but
Sure.
as you're taking opportunity to tweak the design, for me anyway, anything you could do, to kind of go in that direction.
Okay.
I'm sorry, you had.
No, it's a great idea.
And then also, I appreciate you were showing the more updated elevation where you found a way to add some windows in there, and I recognize that it's tough, and as well with those stairways, I've seen that where you have the big window and then there's a stairwell cutting across it. I don't know if this goes along with the style that you're going for, but I have seen in a lot of cases where they'll have like kind of the faux windows and the faux doorways where they make it look like where it was there and then they bricked it in.
Sure.
Right. I think even Portillo's here in town has kind of that look. So again, I don't know if that goes with the style you're going for, but
well, we do
absent putting in a real window.
Right.
It's kind of a way to break it up.
Thank you. And we do use that method along the ground floor to provide relief around the parking deck. There are those recessed bays in brick.
It's hard to tell with the rendering.
Okay, yeah. But understood.
And then similar, again, I'll throw the caveat out there again, I'm not an architect or a designer, so, these types of things may not fit together. But I'm also a big fan of the cut face limestone, big block. Town out. It's a native Illinois Southland material here. Lockport.
Yep.
Practically the whole town
Gaylord.
The Gaylord Building is a prime example there. And even though Park Avenue train station there has quite a bit of that, a nice mix of the cut face limestone, a big huge wood timbers and the wrought iron and the slate roof. You know, for me anyway, even you know, like a little bit of standing seam or something over a window, just little things like that. But again, you don't, I'm sure you don't look like Frankenstein's monster or something. You know, we're trying to have 20 different styles. Your later renderings, I think, are far improved. But one of the concerns I had when I saw some of the earlier ones was that it was just this big mass, and not to be insulting or anything, but I just had this sense like a prison, you know, Eastern Bloc Europe kind of industrial look. What you've done with the newer ones has definitely improved on that. But my concern is especially from the non-primary street view. It just seemed very like it wouldn't be interesting to look at, you know, for some of the neighbors around there. Let's see, I think that was. All right, so I had one more question, or no, one point on the Citibank side. You were mentioning that kind of alleyway, not alleyway, I won't use that term, but that you're concerned about a pass-through and landscaping. I think Citibank has a wrought iron fence going down that side. I thought they did.
I believe so.
So I have a similar concern for pass-through, obviously, but also for public safety. Just want to make sure when the lighting plan comes through that that's, you know, very well lit, and/or potentially a small section of wrought iron fence panel or something to, you know, be an attractive but a physical barrier. It seems like, you know, especially, you know, in downtown late at night, be a public safety concern.
I think some of that lighting could even maybe be used on you know, if they're using a different type of color or material, it can almost use that as an accent type of lighting to dress that up and also use it as security.
So I like some of the ideas that you were mentioning about potentially on the balcony to do something different.
Sure.
So I won't go into a ton of great detail because we'll see what you come up with.
Sure.
One of the things, though, that I noted, putting myself in the place of either the two tenants that have the private area or the people in the shared, that dividing wall, I think you said it was 3 feet.
It's a guardrail height. It's 42 inches right now. It's just a handrail, and we understand that's not enough to offer privacy for those residents. And perhaps since we're providing a little bit more verticality on there, if we play up that corner, that'll allow for some higher wall if need be. If the idea is to have it more of a courtyard feel into those patios, private patios, then that can be explored.
Okay. What? Now this would be a major design. I just want to see if it was considered the possibility that restaurant would, instead of having it be a shared space for tenants, use it as a rooftop for the restaurant. You're smiling, so it sounds like you thought of it already.
Well, I mean, it's a great idea. We'd have ADA accessibility issues. We'd have to carry the elevator up. We'd have to have two means of egress there with the occupancy load and other things. And obviously, food service up there would be compromising. So we've looked at that. However, from that standpoint, with fire separation and other things, also with adjacent uses, there's just a lot of building design issues that aren't beyond just the operational side that become extremely complex.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
I tried really hard for that. I thought it would be a cool like outdoor space, but there are some.
No, that's not
and JC worked on trying to make it work.
Yeah, we did look at that. Now, that's not to say though that we don't want to seek that same sort of vibrancy and energy for resident use that a restaurant could have. So we do anticipate, you know, we have two roof terraces, one that overlooks the bank building on the west side. However, I have a feeling that the one on the second level at a vantage point that's just going to be above the street level is going to be where everybody's going to want to be.
Right.
And so perhaps that's where we actually have the staged resident events with the parties and the food and everything that could give it that kind of vitality that we would look for out of a restaurant.
Right. It's going to be a great place to sit for downtown events.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're just talking about that those upper terrace areas. Some of those areas actually might also be a good use for those, especially if you're talking about maybe some sort of covered structure on that second floor one for the old oak columns from the former cash store. You know, something like that on some of those aspects. Maybe something could be worked in there if you weren't going to use them within something else.
Thanks.
All right, so I appreciate running through all that. One last question I had, and this is really just because I listened as you were going through it a few times, and I'm just not clear on this. On the south side, the parking with Vogue. Unless I'm not understanding what the concern is, I'm trying to understand why this is the petitioner's problem, because it sounds to me like they are using parking that's on that land.
Yeah.
Trying to be good neighbors.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're not necessarily making it a condition or a requirement, but trying to make sure this doesn't throw off whatever they're doing over there.
When they do construction, they're going to be working that area, and there might be an opportunity to just repair it.
So if they came back and said, we never talked to them, I don't know if we'd stop this, but it's just trying to push that.
Okay,
Be a good
that's-
neiver,
that makes sense.
make
And
something
and
work
that's
out
the
there.
appropriate way to go. It sounded to me like something was contingent upon vote approving something. right? And
We just
can
want,
hope
we
that they
just
come to
wanted,
mutual
yeah,
agreement.
we just wanted something that showed, yes, we've reached out to them and talked with them,
Okay,
not,
that's-
that necessarily needs to be in writing, they 100% agree to this, but here we've shown them what we're willing to do.
All right. So that's all I have. Any further questions from the commission? All right. Any based on the discussion tonight, any further comments or anything on this?
Not from me. Okay. No, other than that, we're looking forward to working this next week on resolving some of the outstanding issues, coming up with some answers to some of the questions today, and pursuing our Thursday, November the 1st hearing date. So,
Great.
look forward. Thank you.
Great job,
So-
thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you. So, Kimberly and Dan, do you guys feel you have enough to kind of, between now and the hearing, work things out?
Yeah, I won't run through all the open items and stuff again, because I think you guys dug pretty deep into most of them, and I think I covered, some of them are just stuff they've already agreed to kind of rectify, so I think they've given us enough, and you guys have given us enough where we can work with them, get some updated plans, and cut down that list for the public hearing.
Okay, great. And again, as we did on Boulevard, if anything significant comes up and you're interested in making sure we move forward, and you can do like you did before, email blast out to everyone, and they can give you feedback on a particular point if we didn't cover it. All right? All right, good. So, look forward to the hearing. I did notice it was properly noticed, so I think we're in good shape for that. We would move on to good of the order here, and so I'm not asking you guys to hang around. You're welcome to. I do see at least one member of the public there. Are you looking to speak this evening?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it's probably good that you would hear it. So, Kimberly, do we have anything in good of the order?
I can wait and let him speak first.
Okay,
yeah.
so how about we do that? We move on to public comment if you want to speak, and while the petitioner's here. Would you like to speak now? Or? Sure.
Okay, my name is Bernie Brady. I'm a resident of Tinley Park, and I own the property that's immediately east of this. I am one of the neighboring land uses, however, it wasn't mentioned in the report here. Thank you for recognizing it, Mr. Shaw. The concerns that I have, actually, I came to the meeting to relax and just listen and not necessarily comment. But after sitting through the meeting, I decided that I do have a couple of concerns. No place did anybody ask how many customers the restaurant is going to accommodate and what type of parking situation that's going to cause. There was some discussion about street parking, but I believe the discussion indicated that there would be no street parking on either South Street or 67th Court. So that's a concern of mine. Where are people going to park that are going to go to the restaurant? There's absolutely no parking being provided. I understand what the legacy code is, but that is a concern of mine, particularly since my business is right across the street. The other concern that I have is this loading or receiving area. When you look at the first floor plan, you see something that's referred to as receiving. After there were some questions about trash removal related to the restaurant, it was disclosed that that particular receiving area is also going to be the refuse disposal area for the restaurant. Okay? And that they've been talking to New Way about how that particular trash is to be removed, and I understand that. It was explained a little more clearly by the second person who addressed the trash disposal. The first person indicated that they potentially would be taking bags of garbage out, but I was happy to hear that they were talking about having containers, okay, if you're dragging bags out across the sidewalk. Also, I'm obviously familiar with that area. I've operated my business there for 25 years. And that particular intersection, the site plan, I don't know that I actually saw a site plan in the documents that show the configuration of where that particular receiving door, which is now also going to be the refuse disposal door, lines up. But my sense is that it's going to line up directly with 174th Street. So you're going to have the disposal truck, the refuse disposal truck, parking right there where 174th Street ends. And whether that's going to be a problem or not, I don't know. But that is a concern of mine. I'm not an expert at these particular matters, so I'm going to let the experts deal with it. Potentially, there's a way that the refuse can be disposed of through the west side of the building in what Chairman Shaw referred to as not necessarily an alley, but a walkway of some sort. Maybe that could be the access somehow for the refuse disposal and also for the delivery, because I just said that the disposal truck is going to be parked right there at the end of 174th Street. But if it's the delivery area also, that's where all the delivery trucks are going to be parking. So that's going to cause a problem. And I understand how the new streets are going to be configured because those curbs were poured 2 days ago. And it looks pretty good, actually. Also, there was concern expressed about access, okay, particularly the access to the resident parking. And that's directly across the street from the parking lot that's on the west side of my building. And I believe that could be worked out, but obviously you need to look at that particular access in connection with my parking lot across the street and make sure that that's taken into consideration, okay, as one of the existing neighbors. Another concern that I have is it's going to be a 5-story structure. Once it's built, it's going to be fine. But I just went through 6 weeks and probably another 2 or 3 weeks of having 67th Court shut down and 174th Street shut down, so that I only had access to my building from 174th to the east, and then parking in the American Legion parking lot for some of our employees, which they graciously allowed. And I was happy to deal with that inconvenience, particularly since it's been in September and October. I'm a CPA. A lot of my clients are elder. When we start dealing with this construction in the spring, are we going to have to deal with shutdowns on 67th Court? Also, because of the height of the building, is that going to put us in a position where you're going to have absolute shutdowns while they're dealing with potential cranes? Like I say, I'm not an expert in this, but it's a concern of mine, and I hope somebody addresses it to make sure that I'm not going to be dealing with shutdowns of 67th Court and 174th Street like I have for the last 6 weeks and next 2, and basically that is for the benefit of your firm, gentlemen, since that deals with the routing of the sewer that used to go underneath the property that's being vacated by the village for your benefit. That's basically all I had a chance to write down. Thank you very much for hearing my comments and concerns, and I hope you address them. Thank you.
Thank you. And I know that we thought of just sitting here tonight, but to the extent you think of something else between now and the hearing, by all means, you can send it to staff here or to me, and hopefully, something can be addressed in advance of the hearing.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So, real quick point on his point about shutdowns and all that. We didn't address that here. With the boulevard, that was something that we specifically talked about because it's a multi-phase project, and there was concern about when you go to phase 2, where you're going to stage this stuff, et cetera. This is a smaller project, but still a concern. We don't generally talk about these sort of things, but in this one, is there a requirement that they would also have like a staging plan?
I mean, they're a much smaller site, but and then South Street is doing a significant amount of improvements. I mean, 174th Street is being completely redone. South Street is being redone, and so they're not going to have as much, but we won't know that until we really get into the construction phase. We sit down, we do pre-con meetings. We'll probably want to do some public outreach workshops and get input and have this out clearly for all the businesses in advance. So there's definitely going to have to be coordination.
Okay.
With South Street, it obviously was much more evident because of the phasing. But yeah,
and
good points though to Mr. Brady.
If everything goes well for everybody involved, it's very likely that we're going to have both of these going concurrently.
Yeah, I would like to have them not where we're having construction for 3 years, but I mean, right. It's going to take 2 years for South Street to maybe be built.
But realistically, you can't make somebody wait till the other guy's done.
No, yeah.
Right? You can't say whoever gets there first. When they're through the process, they go.
Yeah, I accept the inconvenience. I understand there's going to be inconvenience. I just would like not to be shut down.
Right. Good point.
All right. Appreciate it very much. Any other members of the public?
Okay, so, good in the order?
If you haven't already, just make sure the fair housing training, I think there's one last opportunity.
25th.
The 25th, okay. Make sure we get that. That's a requirement for all of us. The Boulevard is going to the November 6th Village Board for adoption. They had their workshop this past Tuesday. The vet clinic was also approved on Tuesday night, so excited to see them moving forward as well. And then, as I had mentioned earlier, the residences project is in for permit, and there has been some activity. We've been working with that developer, and they're trying to do some site work, basic grading, because they're putting in for a foundation-only permit. But we met on site. We've gotten some of the concerns some of the concerns done with the developer, and so you're seeing some activity out there, but it's just basic site grading right now. They're getting the site ready, the silt fences are up, we're getting the construction signage up. That was one of the other requirements we needed, so we make sure no truck traffic is going in the wrong areas. So that's another project we'll be doing.
Sure. Yeah, I thought you did very well at the board meeting the other night.
Oh, that's right, you were there.
Presenting, the Boulevard.
Thanks.
Okay. So if there are no further comments from any of the commissioners, I would entertain a motion to adjourn tonight's meeting.
So moved.
Move Commissioner Stan.
Second.
Second Commissioner Gray. All in favor of adjourning tonight's meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.